Good evening. It's your late tackle on a Friday night. Sorry for the late start, but that is because we're waiting for our second guest, Andy. Luke has joined us late, straight from work, so we delayed things for Luke to arrive. First of all, Andy, good evening. How are you enjoying the international break?
Yeah, no, not too bad, thank you. To be honest, I actually forgot England were on tonight, and it was only about 15 minutes in. Someone went, "Oh yeah, this is boring." I was like, "Oh good, I'm not missing anything then." So I was quite happy to jump on a stream with you.
It's pretty turgid from what I can gather. I haven't watched a minute of it. I know Ollie Watkins has scores, which should please our guest, Luke. Luke, you got Watkins in your team, played your wild card, as did Andy. Are you watching any of the England game? I guess you were working, so you're not bothered at all. Do you normally watch the friendlies or not bother?
No, I don't watch England full stop unless it's when it's a tournament. Obviously, I do, but no, I don't watch it. I've put myself through far too many painful memories over the years watching that, so I don't even bother these days, unfortunately.
I once went to an England friendly at Wembley. It was absolutely dreadful. It was just like people just looking around, reading the programme. It's just not. It's just not worth it. And so I'm like you. I don't watch I only watch them to see if my players come out unscathed. Basically, that's what we're really interested about from an FPL point of view. So yeah, we're going to talk about FPL because there's been a lot of stuff going on over the break, a lot of polls and a lot of stuff on Twitter and so on that to distract us. But we want to get back to FPL. There's obviously a week and a bit to go before we get into action, but a lot has happened last week because these two played their wild card. So I need to talk about that. I need to talk about how both of them are feeling off the back of that. They did well. There's 3 green arrows on the screen, so the wild cards look like they were effective. But let's have a look. But before we do, let's just have a look in chat. Do put your questions in chat. We will try and take some questions later on. Plenty of people about. Deli is in the chat, of course. Thomas Rogers, one of our members. FBL Scoop. Lionel Masbury. Greg Frost, as always, is there. Dean McKinney. Hunter Type. Thomas Rogers, I said. Nigel the Crab, of course. They're all in there. Thank you for your support in chat. We will look out for some questions and take them later on if there's anything you want to pick our brains upon. But for now, let's look at your game weeks. Let's look at yours first, Andy. Played wildcard, or Mildcard, as we called it back then.
Yeah.
But 63 points, you got to be pleased with that. Green arrow up to 1.8. Success, would you call it? I mean, you don't judge it by 1 week, but surely you're happy.
Yeah, no, I'm happy. And I'm happy with the team, obviously, moving into the next couple of weeks as well, which was the main thing. I've just got to hope that there's no injuries because obviously I want to roll this week. So I've got 2 free transfers ready for game week 10 when Arsenal and Brighton boys are probably going to be on our minds. So, yeah, I mean, it's funny, actually. Obviously, Salah got me 15 points and helped my rank rise. I was saying to you before the stream, Turner and Mitchell got me more of a rank rise than Salah did.
Yeah.
They're so lowly owned, and obviously that game being 0-0 was quite nice. So yeah, no, I'm quite happy with how it's lining up so far. I was in a few group chats saying I was quite tempted to go with Salah as my captain, but that Luton game just kept kind of distracting me, and I went with Son captain in the end. And to be honest, I don't think I was really going to go for Salah. I think it was just a bit of a temptation. But yeah, no, I'm fairly happy to be perfectly honest. And now obviously Gordon, having brought him in, even though he's suspended, I've got him ready to go this week. So yeah, no, I'm quite happy. I think I was 3.8 million 2.5 weeks ago. Yeah. So up to 1.8, I'll take it.
Yeah, same for Az. He got a 2 million rise as well. He off his wild card that he played the previous week. He went up from 4.6 to 2.6 he is now. Just for people listening on the pod, you got Turner in goal with 6 points, Pedro Porro with 6, Mitchell, who, I said go Guy. What happened there right at the end, you see? Mitchell was on for the free bonus, and me and Az were on WhatsApp going, we're going to have to eat 100 here. And then about 2 minutes later, it swapped, and Guy came in for the 9, and Mitchell dropped out the bonus altogether. I don't know what he did. What did he do? Did he kick the ref or something? I didn't notice.
It was brilliant because you were both genuinely questioning your existence in the WhatsApp. You were like, oh God, maybe we've got something wrong here. What's going on? And then 2 minutes later, he dropped out and Gahey went back up the top. So
there we go. Yeah, should have gone Gahey. But Mitchell 6 points, Cash to 2, Bowen 2, Maddison 6, Son the captain on 6, Salah on 15, Haaland with the 2, Watkins on 5, and then Cameron Archer, this year's booster, with the 2 points. And no regrets on the captaincy. I guess you thought about Salah, like you said, but Son, I mean, they started like a house on fire, didn't they, Spurs? They had those 5 or 6 chances in the first 15 minutes, but it just didn't happen for them. And then Son struggled really to make an impact.
Well, they got the man sent off as well, which didn't help either. And as soon as the man got sent off, everybody was thinking, well, Son's going to go off at some point. And obviously he did. They got the win, and obviously Maddison got the assist, which was nice. But we're happy owning Son and Maddison for the next couple of weeks anyway. And I think, in hindsight, against Luton and the way they started, I think it was still a good captaincy choice. So yeah, no, it's all good. And like I said, playing the wild card is for the next couple of weeks as well.
Well, Porro, Maddison, Son are also in Luke's team. 63 points for him as well. So absolute tide there. Luke, happy with that? You got to be, right? Success.
Yeah, I mean, it got largely carried by Salah captain, let's be honest. 30 points there. Nearly everyone else blanking in my team, unfortunately. Little bits and pieces, I guess, but Maddison, Porro, as you just mentioned, are quite common, I suppose. Watkins too, I imagine. Darwin with the 5, hoped he could do a little bit more for me. But it's not really about 1 week. Like you say, it's how happy you are with the structure and what you think you might change, I suppose, if I was to do it again moving forward. So yeah, happy with the score, happy with the structure in general. There's a few things that I might change. Maybe. I think the most dramatic one probably was finding out about Palmer. I think finding out Palmer at 4.9 million, front 3, taking penalties. I know you could question the minutes maybe moving forward. The fixtures aren't the best.
Fixtures are terrible though, aren't they?
They are, but I think if you're going to pick him in your team at that, I mean, how often do you get, at least on data, a team that is in the top echelons of attacking and, like a dissension, front 3 potentially on penalties, and for at least for the short term, that's like a good option. So I think if I had waited, as I wanted to wait till game week 10, injuries kind of forced my hand a little bit. It was always going to be 10 in my mind, and I decided to go early. We've talked about price rises before, me and you, and I know you do quite regularly on this stream.
I'm on top of it.
Yeah, I'm kind of a little bit the same, and I couldn't afford the team I wanted if I'd have left it, so it kind of pushed me to do it. But if I had waited, this is the thing, right? People like Palmer can emerge, and then suddenly maybe I could have made this team, and then maybe even included Haaland, who I've dropped, in the team more easily with sort of using him in midfield.
Apparently Palmer's injured.
He played for under 21s.
Yeah, so he has a knock, but I mean, the other thing I guess is SuperChats as well, with Robertson's injury last night. He's another one that could be popular amongst wildcards played this week or the week after, because I mean, I know that game week 10 was a popular window for the wildcard. Did you think about that? Did you think about holding on to it? And what was it that drove you to it? Because you were having a good season. It's not like your team was struggling.
No, I mean, I always had it in my mind that I was going to do it in 10. That was always the plan. And obviously I can pull it early if I need to. And, if I go back to my team last week, I mean, I've got Kabore in there. I wasn't sure he was even going to play anymore. I mean, he's pretty much back up anyway. I've got Rashford and Bruno Fernandes, the dreaded two that have been in my team. Crazily enough, I've wildcarded and kept Bruno Fernandes. What the hell was I thinking?
Yeah, but the fixture's good this week, though, right? That's the thinking behind it, right?
There was at least some logic behind it, I like to think, yeah. Alvarez and Haaland versus Arsenal didn't look good. Saka ended up not playing. Estupinan was out injured as well. And then Botman was the killer, really. That injury came out of nowhere. So suddenly I was looking at a team with pretty much no hope what it looked like. And I think in the end, my original team would have pretty much only scored Pickford's clean sheet, as usual. As soon as you drop a goalkeeper, that happens. I had Trippier in my team. So what did Trippier get in the end? Did he get 7 points or something like that?
8, I think.
Well, we'll have a look in a minute because I'll have him. But I think it was
okay.
7, yeah.
Oh,
so those two players would have scored me points. Yeah. No one else would have scored me points. And my captain would have been Son, because I don't have Salah in my team. So in the end, it's like 20 points probably roughly boost already off of it. So I've got to be happy, I guess.
I think I may have got your points
people
incorrect.
mentioned in the chat, I thought I had 58 points.
It's because the graphic. I obviously did Luke's graphic late in because he was a late starter for the show, and obviously the graphics got mixed up. So you did only get 58 points, Andy. Sorry, I know you're getting excited there, but Luke got the 63 and you got the 58. So.
I don't think Luke's. People are saying Luke's is 61 as well.
That can't be right. Let me check. God, it's all gone to bits already, hasn't it?
No, I'm 63. I'm 63.
Bring ours back. Bring ours back.
No, Luke is fine. It's just you that I ballsed up. So you actually. Let me just check what you got. You think it's 58, was it?
Yeah,
it was 58. Yeah. So sorry. You shared the graphic there for Luke because I didn't change that last minute. Oh, sorry. You can't have those 5 points back, Andy. I'm afraid. You're right about Pickford because we said last week, didn't we, Andy? I've got to hold on to him because I know the minute you get rid of him, he'll come in, and he got the bonus as well, and a save point.
Rat!
It's just crazy, isn't it? So I got 67, thanks to one player as well, similar to Luke, and we'll get to him in a minute. Pickford 9, Burn 1, Cash 2, Trippier got the 6, only got 6, not 7. But he did get a couple of bonus, didn't he? And an assist in a 2-2. So just the bonus is kicking in for him again, just like it did last season. Maddison 6, Sterling the 16, Diaby 2, Son captain 6 like you, Salah 15, Alvarez and Haaland just the 2 each. Sterling, right? It was all about Sterling, but he did it again against a promoted team, didn't he? So it's so weird. He's had 2 major game weeks, 19 against Luton, 16 against Sterling. It's kind of justified his selection over Mbeumo for me, because I went Diaby and Sterling over Mbeumo and Matoma, who were the 2 popular choices start of the season. I went against them with Sterling and Diaby, and it's taken 8 weeks, and finally those 2 are above Mbeumo and Matoma. But it took another haul against a promoted side. I think the plan was always to get rid of Sterling. I don't think I can let the 16 points sway me otherwise. What do you make of Sterling, Luke? Do you think he's just a flat track bully this season, or do you think there will be some consistency eventually?
No, I think he's I mean, I didn't get Sterling when everyone did get him, but that's not because I think he's a bad option. I just chose to go a different path. At the end of the day, he's returned against the 2 promoted teams. He's not returned against others, but that's, to me, his happenstance. You picked him because he's got good fixtures and he's a good player, and he's happened to score the hauls in those 2 games, and he hasn't done too much in the other games. But it's not, to me, I mean, you can go through his entire career history, and I know that'd be at different clubs and other stuff. It's not going to always be like that. You pick Sterling for some good games because he's a good price, and it just happened to be that way. Now the games are a little bit worse, but I think at his price you can still hold him quite comfortably. I'm sure he'll do okay. I just think there are, there's teams with better fixtures, and that's why we play this game, right? To try and strip him around. So I think if you can ship him around for someone else, then probably makes sense. But I wouldn't say it's like a priority move. I think he'll do absolutely fine. And continue.
Yeah, I mean, look, Chelsea are bottom of the ticker over the next 6. Arsenal at home, Brentford at home, Spurs away, City at home, Newcastle away, Brighton at home. Those home games maybe aren't as bad as they look. I mean, the City one's obviously going to be very tough. I mean, there are goals there for Chelsea, but I'm not confident in them. I mean, Jackson came back and actually did take his goal well at Burnley and probably will get his start back from Broher. Palmer looks settled on the other side, and Mudryk looks to be likely sub, and then will Sterling play left? Probably will, after what he did against Burnley. But I don't know, those fixtures are tough. And my eyes are all on Jared Bowen, because the opposite is true of him. He goes to Villa this week, but then it's Everton, Brentford, Forest, Burnley, Palace. They've actually got a good run longer than that as well, if I bring up the longer ticker. Yeah, their fixtures are good right the way up to, I mean, Spurs away could be a tough game, but I still see West Ham scoring there. It's not until Arsenal away in Gameweek 19 that they have a fixture where you wouldn't want to play Bowen maybe, but you'd still play him. The thing about Bowen as well, and I want to ask Andy about this, Moyes is dropping all the clues, isn't he? He's saying, yeah, I see him as a centre forward, and that's in manufacturing at the moment, whatever that means. What does that mean? And obviously Kudus came on and got the goal, and all the West Ham fans are pleading for Kudus to start and Bowen to move to centre and Kudus to get one of the wide roles. I think that's going to happen anytime soon, isn't it? Surely.
Yeah, it happened midweek in Europe, didn't it? Bowen played up top and got a goal as well. It's sort of, I mean, when Antonio seems to be fit, he does still seem to favour him going up top, but he can't stay fit for too long, can he? So surely Bowen gets all the minutes when he's fit. So I'm assuming at some point it's going to happen. Obviously, I picked Bowen in my wildcard because I asked a few West Ham fans and they all expect it to happen. And I just thought with those fixtures coming up and him potentially playing out of position, and his minutes are always so high as well, it seemed like quite a good shout. The thing that I found tough was trying to pick between him and Diaby. I found that really, really tough because Diaby's got such nice fixtures as well. Obviously, if you look at the long-term ticker, it's not too nice, but his next 4, West Ham, Luton, Forest and Fulham, it's quite a nice 4, isn't it? So I did find that quite hard. Neither of them are on penalties. Obviously, I don't think we're expecting Bowen to be on penalties either.
It's Paquetá, isn't it? When Ben Rama's not playing, I would have thought.
Yeah. And even then, if neither of those two are playing, I'm assuming you're going with Ward-Prowse maybe over Bowen. So it's I really like him for this run. And I know Luke just mentioned then about Sterling. Obviously, Mark's tempted to do the Sterling to Bowen move. Would you be tempted to make that move, Luke, or would you be holding on to Sterling?
Oh no, like I say, if it's a move that you can make freely and there's no other issues in your team, then it's the fixture play. It's a no-brainer. I mean, in my team, I've got that move penciled in for 10. Bruno Fernandes comes out and he goes to Bowen. I just didn't want to pick him for these 2 games. I didn't think he'd do that well, playing Newcastle, etc. And he didn't do that well, but unfortunately my alternatives didn't do well either. So I could have almost saved the move. I think he's a bit of a no-brainer. I just want to touch on the up-front thing. I mean, we have seen this before where, a player goes up front and instantly it's seen as potentially a positive thing. I don't necessarily think that might be the case for Bowen. I mean, as a general rule, I think, the more centre in the pitch and the more high up the pitch you are is a pretty good rule of thumb of a player doing well and potentially scoring goals. But in West Ham setup, we all know Bowen plays on the right. He is the main goal threat for them, really. Antonio is kind of that foil man, isn't he? He's the big man that they hit, and he runs the channels and he runs down blind alleys a lot of time, people will say, but he creates the space for Bowen. Now, if you suddenly ask Bowen to change his role, and I appreciate he did score in midweek versus lesser opponent up front, and then you've got maybe Kudos on the right, I don't think there's any guarantee that therefore that just improves Bowen as an asset. Like, I think he's fine anyway. I'd pick him whichever role he'd be in, don't get me wrong, but I think we can quite quickly jump to the conclusion that would be a better thing. I don't think it necessarily is. To me, there almost has to be, that's fine, but Moyes has to kind of change his approach a little bit then. Does he want Bowen to run the Antonio role? Because if he does, I don't think he can do it the same way, right? He has to sort of change the tactics a little bit, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's what he means by it's in manufacturing. I think what I gather from that is that they're trying it out. They're probably having training matches and maybe behind closed doors matches where they're trying it out. They want to get Kudos in the team, and they can't do it with Antonio playing up front. I just don't see a way they're going to do it because the team picks itself at the moment. Souček's playing well, Paqueta's there, Prowse, of course. There's not a place for Kudos, and he took his goal well. It's only a matter of time before he gets him in the team, and to get him in the team, I think he's going to move Bowen. Obviously, what I'm harking back to is Arnautovic. If you remember what Moyes did with him, converted him from out wide to a centre forward. And I do think, though, you're right, Arnautovic perhaps has got more about him in terms of holding the ball up. But I don't know, but I think Bowen will be effective. I think it's an unknown, isn't it? It's totally an unknown, and you're gambling on it being a positive, which it could be, because Arnautovic definitely was. I remember getting on that really early when he moved him, and it came in for me. And I'm looking at Bowen in the same... It's an upside, right? It's a potential upside that I want to get on. It might not come off. It might have the opposite effect, but I think it's worth a shot. But even if it stays where he is, he's still a great option with those fixtures.
Well, this is it. At the end of the day, the minutes are there, the fixtures are there. So that's almost like something I just don't think we should get too sidetracked by either way. It may come to fruition that it doesn't work out particularly well. You said about Arnautovic, he's kind of got the more physical qualities. Obviously, he likes Antonio for that. He's used Fellaini in similar roles in the past. I think he does like a physical presence there. I'd say Bowen, although he is like industrious, I wouldn't say he's that physical. So it remains to be seen how that works. But bottom line is he looks a great pick for this run wherever he's going to play. And let's just hope it doesn't mess with a team dynamic too much. Because I'd say if there's one criticism you could probably put on Moyes is for him to suddenly sort of change tactics on the fly is probably like a little bit of a, well, maybe that's being harsh, but the fact that he says he's got to manufacture it, to me seems like it's not something he's really been thinking of too much, and he's kind of wondering how he's going to churn that out.
I don't know what that meant. I mean, I think that Bowen's good enough to play there for sure, and he's a great finisher, and he did play a central role for Hull at times, so I think he can do it. But it does sound like it was a really weird thing to say the way Moyes put it. And he's obviously talked about Kudos and he'll play lots and whatever, but he must be aware of the pressure to get him in the side because he's a talent as well. But do you think it's a clean cut decision in terms of Bowen over Ward-Prowse? Because if we look at the midfield data, they're right neck and neck in terms of XGI non-penalty per 90, 0.55 each, I believe, or 0.54 Bowen. Now, Ward-Prowse is a provider, so most of that XGI is coming from XA, from expected assists, whereas Bowen's more of a goal threat. If you couldn't afford Bowen for this run, Ward-Prowse is a decent step down, isn't he?
I think he is. I think he gets poo-pooed in the community because of obviously his past, but we have to be open to the fact that he is playing a slightly different role. The thing is, it is still a really small sample, so you have to be wary of that. I think the game last weekend, we saw he wasn't really that advanced and he was all over the pitch, and it was more what we're used to. And the XG data can be skewed very heavily by the fact that, I mean, if you think of his goals, I don't know if you've watched them, but a lot of them have ended up being quite close to the net, almost like headers, I think, from open play and stuff, that the ones that he scored. And it's like, that's not really his role. Is this a new thing? And then suddenly it's not. So you just have to be very careful of thinking, suddenly he's going to be this like marauding 10 who's going to end up filling the space Antonio vacates and scores goals. The bottom line does, at that price, I think, and with those fixtures, he's a decent pick. Given the choice between the two, it's Bowen for me quite clearly until I see otherwise. Like, I'm open to the chance. We've been playing this game long enough, Mark, that we know anyone can suddenly become an option that you never expected to be an option in the past. There's been people like Ramsey and Yaya Toure that were...
Oh, don't mention those two.
nowhere
You had to
to
go
be
there,
seen.
didn't you? You had to pluck those two names out
Of course, because that was like my best season and your worst, I think.
Yeah.
So I've always going to reference
thanks
it.
so much.
Yeah. So I'm open to it, and I think he is a better option than he was in Southampton. But is he better than Bowen?
Yeah.
Not quite sure on that yet.
So Andy, in this run that we brought up on screen for West Ham and Villa, you got to have at least one of each, right? Do you think a West Ham is essential, or can you go without Bowen or Ward-Prowse?
Wow, that's literally what I was just thinking when you brought up the stats there, because I'm kind of thinking in my head, if you can't get to Bowen and it was a choice between Ward-Prowse or Mitoma or something like that, I'm thinking, because that run of Brighton's just ridiculous.
It is as well,
You know, Fulham, Everton, Sheffield United, Forest in 4. I'm kind of thinking, do you just wait a week and just get Mitoma and don't worry about that slot, if that makes sense? Because are West Ham that essential? Like, obviously, I picked them on a wild card because, you know, you kind of can on a wild card, can't you? And you can kind of take that punt. But if you're not playing your wild card, or if you've already used it, I'm just wondering whether waiting a week and getting on one of those Brighton boys or getting a Diaby is probably the better play, because I think you just can't ignore those fixtures, if I'm honest. And I personally, I don't think if I couldn't get Bowen, I don't think I would get Ward-Prowse, although he is playing in a different role to what we've seen him play in Southampton. I just still don't like my midfielders. I want them to be getting in the box more. So, yeah, I think I'd probably wait a week and then get on a Mitoma.
The worry with Mitoma is the fact that the games are all, well, it's De Zerbi, isn't it, in the rotation thing. I don't think Mitoma will necessarily be a factor to that, and that run's so good. I'm with Andy there. I'd get Mitoma over James Ward-Prowse all day, but that is in the back of your mind, isn't it? They have got a lot of games during that period, and you think he's going to play Mitoma in Europe, isn't he? Surely. So does he rest him at all? Maybe not even rest him, just sub him off. I don't know.
He does seem to be the guy that, you know, is a bit more assured in that team, isn't it, in terms of the competition, maybe. I know we spoke to Az not that long ago, and he was saying that Adringa seems like he could be a good shout for the run. But again, like you just said, like if you're worried about Mitoma, you're going to be extra worried about, you know, Adringa if you want to be playing him for those 4 games.
I just don't want it. I just don't want that team sheet anxiety. I hate having players that I'm not certain are going to start. And obviously we've had this with City players from the get-go. But at the moment, I think Pep's choices are limited, so we're not really going through that anxiety with City. But with Brighton have become that now. It's like Estupiñán, for example, right? He looks great from game week 10 onwards, but you know he's got the injury now, so he's out of the equation, probably long term. So he's probably not a factor. But even before the injury, I was like, I got rid because I thought, you know, week to week, I don't even know if he's going to start because Lamptey's there now, and he didn't start at Old Trafford, did he? He rested him for that. De Zerbi's just unpredictable as well, I think. It's really been hard to see a pattern in what he's doing.
I'd hate to be a predictor.
Imagine trying to predict for a really tough team like that. The only thing I will say about Brighton, and we said this on Scoutcast a couple of times, because I know Seb kept Pedro for a lot longer than a lot of people did. The XG they're putting up, even if they come on as a sub for the last 30 minutes, like we've seen Mitoma haul for him coming on with 30 minutes. We've seen Pedro score 2 penalties from it. They're probably up there with City in terms of if they don't start, you could still get a return off the bench. Like the likelihood is a lot higher than other teams. So I think for that run of 4, Mitoma's not going to be benched for what? I don't know. I'm going to probably put my foot in it here, but I'm expecting him to start 3 of those 4 potentially. So if he's benched for one of them, that's still okay, isn't it?
It is okay. It depends. I mean, like he's going to come on as well. That's the thing. So you're going to get 15 minutes. Yeah, but is that a good thing? It's almost you almost want to be.
He came on and scored a brace last time.
Yeah, no, it's fair enough. Yeah.
I don't think that's going to happen again. Like I would still be happy to chance Mitoma in that run. I think the games are good enough. I do think that he probably will play maybe even all 4. Like I think De Zerbi said he's one of the special names, didn't he? That he.
What does that mean?
I know he's then benched him versus Man United, so I'm not sure, but. 3 out of 4 with Andy. I think I would take that. I was looking at the XG open play, and again, I know small sample. Brighton are top from open play, 13.51 over the 8 weeks. Comparing to Ward-Prowse, like I said, West Ham, they're 8.37. That's mid-table. That's below Man United, for Christ's sake. That's level with Wolves. I know we're talking about individual players here rather than a team, but you're taking that minutes gamble rather than a threat gamble, isn't it? It's just a different way.
To be fair, though, Luke, when you're looking at Ward-Prowse, you should be looking at not open play. XG as well, because obviously
Well,
he completely monopolises the non-open play.
This is
doesn't he?
true, but yeah. So essentially, you're waiting for that set piece assist, aren't you?
Yeah,
Which
you
shouldn't
are.
even. I mean, necessarily, you wouldn't even say it lies with fixtures. I mean, that could come anytime.
No, it's random. Yeah. But I mean, you're right. I mean, look at this table. This is the XG non-penalty per 90. Brighton right up the top there. Just 1.98 XG per 90 non-penalty. Newcastle top 1.99. So they're second for that in the division. West Ham, you're right, mid-table, 11th, just behind Man United, 1.46. So, yeah, Matoma does look incredibly... This is why people were wildcarding in 10, wasn't it? Because of the swings. Arsenal come back in. Newcastle still good. West Ham, Villa, Brighton. There is
Liverpool,
that swing.
Even though it starts earlier, it's great from 10 as well, yeah.
I mean, that is why the wildcard in 10 was useful. I mean, you've got your plan to go Bruno to Bowen. I think that's valid when you've got Villa well covered with Diaby, Cash and Watkins. I'm going to have to start talking about Haaland. Was it Watkins' form and the promise of Darwin getting regular starts that was enough to convince you to get rid of Haaland? Was that the thing? Or were there multiple factors in it?
No, that's not really anything to do with it, to be honest. Watkins was probably being there anyway. It wasn't to the form. I mean, I had Watkins. The only reason I sold Watkins was to get Alvarez, but I did it in game week 3, not later like most people did, because I got lucky enough to get early on Alvarez at 6.5. So that was an even harder sell for me, to be honest, on a side note, to sell Alvarez. But yeah, I mean, how many... The thing with Haaland, right? I look at review. The expected value for the teams with Haaland and without Haaland were very, very close for this period. I don't plan to not have Haaland. Like, let's just take this even a step back. Given the age of Haaland, given how long he's likely to be at City, with the information we know now, how often is it in the future, probably in the next 10 years, if he's still there, am I not going to have Haaland in my team? It's not going to happen, is it? He's going to be in there all the time, at least.
Yeah, no. You've not signed a contract for the next 5 years, so it's fine.
No. So I mean, I when it at least makes some grounded mathematical sense in game week 8, I would say. I don't think it does this week, and I don't think it did in 10. I never planned to not go with Haaland in 10, but it did for 8. It gives me that opportunity to be a little bit different. In 16, when they play Luton, that's the plan for me to get Haaland back in. So this period now, I have to hope that my team combined can at least match or get close, and it's to be a little bit different and have a little bit of fun. Some grounding.
I love it. Right, we teased Andy about his mild card last week, and we can't throw that accusation at a wild card without Haaland. The only thing I would say is you're talking about 16. What are you going to do then? Use free transfers to get into a position where you can get Haaland, or you just take a hit, or?
No. I mean, if everything goes, with the wonderful sites that we've got these days, and you can visualize it, if everything goes well, which I'm sure it won't, but if it does, it's quite easy because Salah goes to Mbomo, and then you can just change.
So you'll lose Salah at that point.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at 16, you've got it up there, aren't you? Yes, it's away to Palace, but the run straight after is Man United, Arsenal, and I think it just makes sense. At the end of the day, I don't want to miss, if Haaland's playing Luton, I don't want to miss that one. And then obviously he's got the double game week. I can bench him in 18, and then I've got him ready for the double game week if it fits into, is it 20 like it's supposed to?
Yeah, it should be. Everyone's saying 20 is likely, aren't they?
So it's to have 2 free transfers and essentially swap Salah for Haaland. That's pretty much what the plan will be. Whether it ends up being that way, we'll see. But that's certainly the plan.
Did you think about it at all, Andy, when you had the wild card? Did you look at it? Because you must have. Everyone did. Everyone who was doing my wild cards was looking, what can I get without Haaland? And obviously Luke's team looks fantastic in terms of the spread. Did you do the same, or did you not even think about it?
At the very beginning of the week, so I pressed the wildcard button obviously on the Saturday when the deadline went because of price changes, and it's just been ridiculous. And I did look at it, and I was messaging Flappy and Seb saying, I think I'm going to do it. And then I just kept making teams, and I just wasn't that fussed about what I was making. I was looking at it and thinking, I don't feel like the risk of going against it was kind of counterbalanced with what I was making. So I was kind of getting the Trippiers and Trents, and I was looking at it and thinking, I just don't know whether it's worth it. And then I started looking at obviously the weeks and thinking, Brighton at home, I'm going to want him then. Bournemouth at home, I'm going to want him then. Then there is a run of like 4 game weeks where it's like Chelsea away, Liverpool at home, Spurs at home, Villa away. And I'm thinking that is a really tough run. And then like Luke's just said, from 16 onwards, you're going to want him back again. And I just thought I'm going to struggle to own Salah and Haaland a little bit later on and move funds around. Because even like Luke was just saying there, Crystal Palace away is tough, but Man United at home, like, God, we've been destroyed by them at Anfield before. And I'm just thinking, I've got to want Salah still then. And it just, in my head, made it simpler. Just
the thing is,
him.
we're talking about elite assets, right? We're talking about Salah and Haaland, who it's very hard to say how relevant the fixture is to their ability to output, right? I mean, we've seen Haaland do it against top European sides, and we've seen him do it in the Premier League against big sides, or he tends to punish the weaker sides, as does Salah. But then Salah went to Old Trafford and got a hat-trick, didn't he, win that famous Havertz Gameweek. These are players that don't really play by the fixtures as easily as we can predict players like Bowen and Matoma that we've talked about already. You've got to think that it's harder to predict when the hauls are going to come. But I do think this is a window. I'm looking at it as well. I'm looking at possibly getting Haaland out for Watkins next week. I wouldn't spread the funds so I could get him straight back again, because the beauty of Haaland at the moment is he's down to 14 million, right? So there's no loss there. So going Haaland to Watkins for 1 week, I'm basically banking on Watkins outscoring Haaland at home to Luton while Haaland is at Old Trafford. It's risky because a lot for what I just said. Haaland could go to Old Trafford and get a hat-trick. Do I back Watkins going home to Luton? I probably will. So, I mean, it's whether you want that upside. So it's a real tease at the moment and I think it's great. I think in previous seasons we've not had this kind of scenario where upside chasing with big elite assets has been so feasible. We've been so settled. Whereas this season, for some reason, I don't know what it is, the ingredients have just mixed in a way whereby suddenly teams are diverging in this way. And yeah, it's good. I think it's great for the game.
Are many teams diverging that way?
I don't think there's many people without Haaland. I think about a third of the wildcards are going without Haaland from what I can see at the moment. Okay. But whether they will when they press the button, I don't know, right? But I think you see a lot of people go, this is my team without Haaland. Whether they go with that, I don't know.
Are you on about wildcards this week? Because
I'm seeing wildcards this week, and people talking about what they're going to do in 10 as well. And there's a lot of talk about, going Salah instead of Haaland and then spreading the funds as a viable option. Do you not
I just want to say it's nothing to do with form on my hand. Like, I don't for a second think that that's a problem. Like, Haaland's not been in the best goal finishing form, and Man City haven't even been the best. You can even see from their data, it's not particularly strong.
I was going to come on to that because that is absolutely a point. I mean, they're seventh. They're seventh, which is good, but not what we'd expect. 1.71 XG non-penalty per 90. And then you look at the forwards, and Haaland's not at the top of it. He's fifth, 0.86. Good. But you'd expect him to see him, up there with Nunez, neck and neck with Nunez. So, do you think you're saying it's not form? So you're not basing it on. You just don't think at the moment the injuries are taking their toll a bit on City, and they're not as fluid, etc.
I mean, maybe, but the injuries. I mean, certainly in the markets, injuries don't seem to dip teams as much as you might expect as someone who watches it. I mean, you see it all the time on Sky Sports, or we even say, they're without this player, makes a huge difference. But overall in the markets, the teams won't dip that much. And, the markets are good. They make a lot of money for a reason. I don't have any concerns there whatsoever. We've seen this a number of times with Man City. Even saw it last season. They go for a period where it doesn't quite work. And lo and behold, Pep Guardiola, world-class manager, world-class squad, finds a way to make it work. It can happen in an instant as well. It doesn't necessarily need to be a process that takes them a long time. Like, they've been through this a lot. The fixtures are there. For me, just touching on my team, this week is the scariest week without Haaland for me by a mile. Home to Brighton, I expect him to do extremely well in that game. I'll be lucky to get away with it, but we're talking about a period. No one who has got rid of Haaland thinks that he's not going to, I can't speak for everyone, but I don't think they think that he's not going to be incredibly good again. It's gambling other ways, isn't it? It's over this period until 16. My team can do just as well, and hopefully my captains can kind of match it.
Do you know something we don't in game week 11 then? Home to Bournemouth.
That's a scary one too. Don't get me wrong. That's there. That's there as a scary one. But Liverpool have got Luton, haven't they? So that one I'm a little bit more comfortable with it. I would say not quite. Whereas Salah in the early kickoff after internationals versus Everton is probably not. And Everton, again, data-wise, have been a decent side. So that's not quite as close. I mean, I'd be on Haaland all day if I had him in that situation. So it's a little bit of a gamble, a little bit of fun. Like I say, when else am I going to have the opportunity to do something like this? Probably not again, unless these circumstances perfectly align. And probably the next
and one thing I'd mention to Andy is that when you commit to it, are you absolutely determined to hold to that tactic.
Oh,
until
yeah, I won't
City-
let the form affect me. If he scores 4 goals versus Brighton, I won't be getting him in for Man United. That doesn't touch the side for me. I'm not, I'll be absolutely devastated that it's happened. And it's a risk on effective ownership. When he's 14 million, he gives you this opportunity. If he wasn't 14 million, if he was 12, 11 or something like that, it wouldn't even be a question. It's a question of value across a set period, isn't it? And yeah, you can argue like Andy, he's done the same. He's looked at his team and he thinks that he can make it, good with Haaland and Salah. And I think you can. And I touched on it, the likes of Cole Palmer. And there are some cheap options that if you're happy to pick, it could work just as fine. I don't think there is a clear route. And that is the beauty of it. It's like all of these routes are viable to me. And ultimately, the result is the only thing that will matter at the end of it. And we can't control that part. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
That's what you need, isn't it, Andy? You need budget options to come in. And Palmer has come to the fore. I guess Tsimikas is there. You've got Gordon in your team for that very reason. And you look at Newcastle top of the ticker there, he's no doubt he's in outstanding form. And that could, in terms of enablers, that must have been your thinking, right?
Yeah, so I was torn between him and Neto. And obviously Neto got an assist. He carried on getting attack and returns. I obviously showed you guys the wild card. And when I don't know what it is, but when it gets brought up on the screen, you kind of look at it differently to when it's on your phone screen. And I was just looking at Neto and thinking, next week, who am I going to be happy to own? Is it going to be Neto or Gordon? Yeah. And just looking at that run for Newcastle, I was like, I've got to go for Gordon. So I did. But there are those cheaper assets. The only thing I will say is when you do own Haaland and Salah, I mean, you look at Luke's team, he hasn't really got any compromises in his team. Whereas you look at my team and there's a lot of compromises. I was surprised though, Luke, that you didn't have Trippier. That's the one person I was surprised at. I thought if you go Haalandless, I thought Trippier was kind of like you'd have him straight away kind of thing. But what was your thinking there? Was it just you didn't fancy him or?
No, I think he's fine. And I had him, I got him for the last 2 weeks where he's got loads of points. I just decided that between him and Trent, I was happy to take that extra bit of spice and go for Trent because I liked his fixtures better over a longer period. So that's my gambit. It hasn't worked out from the first game, as you can tell. And again, this week is probably the most scary. I mean, Trippier at home to Palace. Can anyone see Palace scoring with all their players out? He's going to get a haul with it, isn't he? Almost certainly. So yeah, that this week's a worry. But I think after that period, yes, Newcastle's games are good, but I think Liverpool's are better.
I think with Trent, it's ceiling, isn't it?
Yeah, and look, we discussed this a lot. Can I go Trippier to Trent and downgrade? Yeah, I can at any point. So that can happen. I did look at teams with both of them, but I just wasn't happy with the balance. I could make it work. I could have gone Alvarez and not got Darwin. I just decided to
Must have been tempting. Must have been tempted to go both. What about Darwin actually? Because Jota's back. What are your hopes for Darwin? Do you intend to start him every week and take the bench-ins, or are you going to bring Zinchenko in and bench him now and again when you think it's more likely? It's hard to read, I guess. So you're just going to play him every week.
Yeah, I spoke to quite a few Liverpool fans, and I know there's options there. So I'm not stupid to think that he will definitely play every game. And even when he plays, he's likely to come off. It's just, I think that he, with those fixtures, and I think he is first choice. The only worry was the fact that he was carrying this slight knock and stuff. I'm happy to roll with it until I see it's a problem. Now I know this week is likely going to be a problem because of the internationals. It's been well documented. Early kickoff. Klopp has rested them previously when this has happened. So there's a good chance this week that he might be benched. But because it's the early kickoff, because I think we're very likely to get some sort of leak, I've got Dan Burn there on my bench at the moment, who's home to Crystal Palace. I'll just play him instead if he's benched. Yeah. And if he's not benched, I'll run Darwin.
See, that's interesting, isn't it? With the leaks do change things because previous seasons we haven't had them. This season you can almost bank on getting something, can't you?
Absolutely. Well, for Liverpool, we get it quite regularly. So I'll just play Dan Burn over him. Moving forward, it's an evolving one with him. I guess we'll see what's happening. But at the time when I've made the decision, bear in mind that Gakpo is injured in a leg brace. I know it looks like he might be coming back more quicker than expected. But I think he's more safe for Europe. We can see that there's been a little bit of a pattern, really. It's been more Gakpo and Jota for Europe and more Diaz and Darwin, I think, when he's available, at least, in the Premier League. And I think the games are the kind of games that Klopp will be more open to playing Darwin in. Games that they should be winning comfortably, essentially.
Kimmy in the chat sums it up. I'd love to own Darwin. Proper fun FPL pick. If you're gone Trent and Darwin, Liverpool games are going to be incredible for you to watch. They're either going to be incredible or incredibly frustrating.
Yeah. Normally, when you triple up on a team, it's usually the second one.
That Everton game, first kickoff, what a prospect for your weekend. It's like, I'd love to go into it with that. I mean, there's always the trepidation of like the first game of the game week of the 12:30, but it is great when you go in with a couple of differentials, isn't it? When you got a couple of differentials, Andy, and you know it's on telly, and you think, blimey, it's like with your three Spurs, Pedro, Porro, Maddison, and Son. That Luton game, you must have thought. Surely you were excited about that prospect, but obviously it
Turner and Mitchell, mate. That's what it was. Watching that 0-0. Watch that 0-0 on Saturday night.
Watching. Hey, it's all points.
Oh, exactly.
I was down the garden centre basically on your advice, so I missed it.
It was, I know. It was brilliant. It is though, yeah. I get that as well, and I think that was some of the reason why it was quite fun to go with like Gordon, but even Bowen. I can't remember what percentage owned Bowen is now, but some of those players, even if they're like just 10% owned, they're getting 90% of their points is lovely. So. Yeah, no, I do get that. And yeah, like I said, Turner and Mitchell were my two differentials, so that made my Saturday
It's horrible
night
though when you're cheering for 0-0 because like every attack you don't know, and especially when you're covering both teams, so you just want the ball to be stuck in midfield all the time, don't you? And obviously this season with the stoppage time, it's even worse. It's agony, absolute agony. So it's. I just like I say, I like seeing our sides. Diverge so much. Luke, do you still see there's a template that's strong, or do you feel this season it's suddenly turning? I feel it's turning towards a much more varied setup. But the way you were talking earlier, it's almost like you don't agree with that. You feel there's still a strong template.
I don't think there is. I mean, I think that the sort of midfielders, the ones you want to pick, there's so many options there. I agree that there's quite a few, but again, I don't think there's that many really, realistically. It's Arsenal midfielder from 10 at least. Saka is probably going to be really popular. In Bowen, maybe the form's dropped off, but there's lots of names we've already spoke around that price bracket you can go to. Obviously you want to cover Aston Villa if you can, Newcastle in defence. I think it is quite samey, to be honest. That's part of the appeal of being different over this period. I think, again, we're going to get funneled from that point of about game week 16 when the double game week comes in, where all the teams are going to be quite similar again. I wouldn't be surprised if they are. I mean, the amount of options we get now are actually, I think, getting less and less every single season because all the top teams have got ridiculous squads and they're more happy to rotate more than ever. So there's not that many players you can say, that guy's definitely starting. I mean, Salah and Haaland are ones that seem to stand out, but outside of those players from those teams, you start to worry about it. And now Arsenal have followed suit. I think with Arteta, seem to be going that way as well. You've obviously got Brighton, some of the most fun teams that have got the best attacking assets. You can't really be 100% on their players, and even some of the like old tried and tested, like Rashford's coming off now a lot earlier than he used to. It just gets scarier and scarier every season, I think. So the point there is everyone then ends up getting funneled to the players that are nailed, the Bowens, the people like that. Like, you can't question those picks as a result. So I think the teams will end up being very, very similar again. Not that that's a problem, right? At the end of the day, people that just want to get points.
But I do think the emergence of Son in the 9, the fact that Salah has been consistent, and the fact that there are, I mean, you're saying you don't question Haaland, but I think there are some people who are. They're saying 14 million now silly for a player. Well, I think it's inevitable. Like if you look at his returns, I mean, this is from FPL Radar, friend of the show, and he's got 2 big hauls, very similar to Sterling, but around that, he's got 3 blanks, right? So I think there's been some regression, you could say, but it's such a small sample, right? And I guess that's the point you'd make. But I think there are, because Watkins is there and he's been so consistent as this shows, there is a strong alternative when you throw Darwin into the mix as well. And then you've got, you've got the likes of Wilson and Haaland, maybe Jesus will come back into the thinking with Arsenal's fixtures. So there are some options there where you can look away. And obviously it's difficult for people to get Salah, Haaland, Trippier and Son in a team, right? So it's almost like if you're wildcarding, you can't get them all. So Haaland, I think at the moment, is the one that people are almost willing to sacrifice. Do you not think of Son, Salah and Haaland? Would you not say he's the one that the lesser one of those 3?
Well, maybe that's what people are thinking, but I think have you based anything on what points someone has scored in previous weeks?
I was just about to say that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's just. I question you as a fantasy manager straight away. I'll come out and say it.
I'm just saying the masses certainly do, right?
But I'm not bothered about the masses. I couldn't give a shit.
No, well, they do affect it. They're affecting our prices and everything. Right?
I only care about the price change part of it. Yeah. I mean, Ollie Watkins, take away that 23 freak haul, he's done fine, but I don't even think he'd be on that many wildcard teams in game week 10 if he hadn't done that. All right.
Yeah,
I don't think many people would.
That's an interesting question, because before that he was chipping away and no one was that bothered about him. And I was like, well, Diaby's is good. He's covered it and he's less. And then he gets that 23 points and I'm thinking, maybe I need to take Haaland out next week.
Yeah, we shouldn't, should we? I mean, at the end of the day, he's a very good fantasy option in my mind, and he always has been. The fixtures are good. Started with him, super consistent. For the reasons we just mentioned, plays the games at the end of the day in a decent side. But I would argue he is a slightly worse option this season because he's had penalties taken away from him. Yeah, so he is a slightly worse. And then you have to always factor it in compared to other players. You've got players like Alvarez that have emerged that take set pieces and are cheaper, and it's like, okay, I can turn my head there because 8 million is a decent, it's a decent wedge to spend on a forward these days. We generally sort of buy Haaland and then just cheap out everywhere else. Even last season when you got Kane, it was hard to fit him in. So yeah, it's a challenge. I mean, what we all really want, right? And I know this is bad to say, don't we want one of Isak or Wilson just to get injured? Because Newcastle's attacking data is so good. That's my easy Darwin out clause as well.
Yeah, and again, that would perhaps make losing Haaland, again, more of an option for people if they felt they could get a Newcastle attacker nailed on, because they are a strong attacking side this year. And I think at the moment, I wouldn't say there's question marks over City, but I think people are saying, when we talked about Alvarez and how vital he was, I had a lot of people come to me and go, well, the injuries will catch up with them, so I wouldn't go Alvarez. I'd definitely go with Watkins over Alvarez. And maybe they're right. Watkins has outscored Alvarez, thanks to that 23 points largely. But I was like, I don't know. Like you, I was saying, Pep will find a way of getting around this period. But, I mean, I've got Haaland and Alvarez, and I'm looking at the fixtures thinking, you know what, maybe that is too much at the moment, but I'll stick with it because obviously I've got faith in Pep. It's interesting because I was expecting you to have made a strong case for the reason why you've got rid of Haaland, but you're almost making a strong case for, no, I'm doing it just because there is a risk, but it's the reward and I'm willing to roll the dice on it. And that clearly was what you went with. There wasn't any other driving force behind it. It was just because you run the models and the teams with and without are very close, so you might as well go for it, basically.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Effective ownership. Like, I don't let that factor into my play as a I'm scared of it. I am scared of it, but I don't let it affect my play. Is the bottom line. Yeah. I know that if one Haaland, let's say he scores a brace versus Brighton as captain, and you'll see all that. The doubters, everyone took you out. Lol at you.
Blah, yeah. I mean, don't go on Twitter.
If my captain gets one goal in that game week, and then, like I've already said, in the next 5 gets close to it across the whole team, it doesn't make any difference, does it?
You can see the inject Haaland hat-trick now, can't you? You can absolutely see it.
And I've always got Sky to fall back on, Mark, by the way. He's my captain in Sky, so I'm a Sky manager. That's fine.
Well, does that count? Yeah, I know. I want to talk about Son and Saka, right? Because that's coming my way, that debate. And obviously there's a lot of concerns about both players of injury. I think probably more on Son, because it does seem to be ongoing. Where are you on that, Andy? Because we've both got Son, and obviously Arsenal's fixtures are turning. As was on here, cockily claiming he's doing a move for Son to Saka game week 10, no issue, not even going to think about it. Are you the same? Because I'm still like, I don't know. What do you think?
We spoke about this last time, didn't we? And I want to have 2 free transfers in game week 10 because I want to be able to have the option of moving midfielders around, because Mitoma and Saka are going to be quite high on my wish list. But it's who to move them out for. And obviously Maddison and Son seem to be the 2 that I keep coming back to in terms of getting rid of. Now, I've got Bowen, and I want to obviously keep Bowen for that week and for the foreseeable. Spurs seem to go down a little bit in terms of the fixtures, but they're still not awful, I wouldn't say. And obviously Gordon I want to keep because he's an enabler and I can't move him up anyway. So it kind of keeps coming back to those Spurs boys. And I think with Son, the biggest thing is the minutes at the moment. He does seem to keep going off, and he's getting overplayed so much by club and country. And obviously seems to have this niggle and keeps going off for 60, 70. And I'm just wondering with him, even though he's on pens and he's playing up top, you've got to start thinking after a while that those expected minutes are not what we want them to be. And I'm just looking at it and thinking, do I want to keep Son over Maddison? Is it Son that I move out for Saka? But then we spoke about it, and Saka's not exactly the perfect player at the moment because he keeps giving these bloody penalties away. So
And Arsenal aren't, the Arsenal attack's not that convincing either. Look where they are in this table.
If he was definitely on penalties, as in definitely 100% taking every penalty they win, then I think it's a different story. And I think I feel like I need to get him in. But because he just him and Odegaard seem to be sharing them, and he's also just quite happy to move those penalties around. I don't know. I'm going to wait until game week 10 and make sure I have those 2 free transfers and have all the options available to me, and then see what I want to do, because I'm just looking and thinking, is Matoma more of a priority over those 4 weeks than Saka is? But obviously they've got Sheffield United at home, which is one nice fixture, but Brighton have 4. So I'm thinking Saka. If you asked me 2 weeks ago when he'd taken obviously the last 2 penalties, it was a different story. But yeah, I think maybe he's gone down a peg or 2 for me.
So I'll throw this over to Luke. I've got 2 questions for him. We talked about City and it's too small a sample. Pep finds a way. Don't read too much into the data. Arsenal are down here 1.41. It's not just data. Eye test wise as well, it just seems to me Arteta's mixed things up, hasn't quite found the fluidity of last season. We know he's overplayed Saka and it's come to haunt him because now he does seem to have an injury. The penalties as well. You've got 2 Arsenal players, but it's Raya and Zinchenko. So you've only left yourself the option of 1 Arsenal attacker. Does that suggest you're not tempted to go an Arsenal attacker? Because you talked about Bruno to Bowen in game week 10. So that sounds to me like you're not going Saka at all.
I'm doing Maddison to Saka in 10 if all goes well.
Oh, you are? Right, okay.
Well, without a moment's thought, yeah. Arsenal's data's down. I'll come back to it. Small sample. Any team can start slow. Fantastic attacking side. I think at the beginning trying to fit Havertz in, I mean, to me, I just don't know why he's even bothering, but that's another side point. I think he's fine as a 9, don't get me wrong. I think he can do a very good job in certain games, and we've seen him do it against City, but I think fitting him in as an 8 is questionable to me. But at the end of the day, Arteta gets paid huge bucks to make these decisions, and I certainly don't. So there may be something in it, but it doesn't look like it. I just think they're going to be fine. I think the games are good. I think Saka's great. I think we do penalties are great, don't get me wrong. And it's very frustrating as it's in your mind that he's handed these over and what he could have had. But let's just play it out another way. Potentially he just doesn't get given those penalties on another day there. Potentially, you get VAR where maybe it's a penalty you don't even get. Like, there's so much randomness involved in it. And I think you can go through entire seasons where we've had some of the best players in the game, like Salah and stuff, where they've only had 1 or 2 penalties the entire season.
Last season, yeah.
Right, okay. How many penalties did Saka even score last season? I don't think it was that many, maybe 2 or 3 goals. So let's say out of 2 or 3, that's just a random pluck from nowhere figure there. Could be more, could be less.
I'm going to check it out while you
let's say he takes 1 of those. You're missing out on 2 goals as a result. I don't think it should have that much of an impact.
I think he got about 5
No,
or 6.
you were saying earlier that Watkins is a worse asset because he's not on pens.
Oh, he's a worse asset because he's not 100% confirmed on pens for every single one. But the point I'm trying to make is he could go the whole rest of the season and Arsenal could not get a pen and he'd still be a good asset to me. I don't think it's that much of a deal breaker. And the fact that he, to me, is at least the first choice on pen, I think, because we had
I think he is first choice, yeah.
And if he wants to give it to someone else, then he can. I mean, I'll still take that, is what I'm getting at. Like, I don't think it's like a massive negative. I mean, they're playing home Sheffield United in game week 10.
He did only get a couple of pens last season because Jorginho took a couple of calls, right? So
we got 2 pens last season.
Yeah, I thought it was more than that over this. Maybe he took some in cup games and I just merged them.
Yeah, it's not that often that even I think Bruno Fernandes is probably the outlier. He scored about 10 in one season once, and we have had players happen. Like, it can happen, and they're good for the potential, but in reality, players don't really get more than sort of 3 or 4 pens in a season very often.
No, for me, it's more Arsenal have stalled a bit, and the data backs it up. And as I said, it's also the eye test watching them play. When I lost Saka,
Jesus has been out as well, hasn't he?
Yeah, there's been too much change. You're absolutely right. And Havertz at the start of the season trying to get him in the team. Then he mucked around with the back 3 as well. He had Partey playing, of course, and when he didn't start Gabriel, he was trying something out. Zinchenko's injury probably stalled them as well because he was such a key player to them last season. I think it's Martinelli's back now. So they are coming, they are restored to full strength. The injury for Saka's a little bit worrying because we don't really know how serious it is because he has gone away with England. And Arteta did something mysterious where he was trying to defy the leaks and have him in the squad. You know what I mean? There was talk of him. So I don't know. We don't know the injury yet. We don't know how serious it is. So it might be a non-event and he's not going to be back for game week 10 anyway. If he is, it's just, I can't do Maddison to Saka, so it would have to be Son. For me, if Son wasn't going off on 70 minutes, if he was going to 80 like he used to, I think Son would probably be a season keeper. But the fact that he's going off in 70 and missing the extra stoppage time as well, it's a significant chunk of time, makes me think he is disposable or will be at some point disposable. Whether it's for game week 10 to get Saka, I don't know. But where do you stand on Son, Luke? Do you think that in the 9, in an Ange team that's attacking top of the league, you got to keep him?
I think so. I think you keep him in. I think it's easily to get swayed on certain things there. I think there's 2 points I want to touch on there, really. It's Saka, I mean, we've already spoken about having these players that are nailed and play every minute from the top teams is extremely hard to find at value.
Yeah.
And that's what Saka brings you. So that is why Saka will forever remain a great pick for me, even without those penalties. So that's why I think not having him for this run is brave to me, despite the data maybe not being that great. I think he is a really good pick. On the Son thing, I think it's confusing it with captain that makes it difficult. I think if you told me he's going to play 70, 75 minutes every week up front for Spurs as a midfielder with his record, with his track record, I would not want him to remove him at any time. When you start throwing the armband in there, that's when it gets a bit questionable, just because you are missing out on a chunk of, given the price that he's at and the other options compared to your likes of your Salah and your Haaland, it becomes a more difficult conversation. But I don't think it's to the point where you just suddenly remove him. Don't get me wrong, if it's like an injury thing where he's clearly struggling and he needs to be removed before 60 over and over, then maybe we have a different conversation. But we haven't got to that point yet.
No.
So yeah, for me, he stays in. I wouldn't want to remove him if I can help it. But if it's a choice between him and Saka from 10, I probably would edge on the side of Saka, I think, just about. But I wouldn't want to make that choice, and that's why I picked the team that I have, because I can have both of them. That's why I kind of went for that setup. I've looked at that period.
And again, losing Haaland gives you that flexibility to move the money around, right? So that's what I don't have. I would have to sacrifice Son. Andy, you would have to sacrifice Son, right? So it's a much tougher decision for us, although as made it sound very, very easy. Looking at the captaincy, going back to you, Andy, you've got the same as me, Salah, Haaland, Son. Looking at the game weeks 9 to 19, do you know now where you're going to captain them, or are you going to leave it to last-minute decisions per match? Do you do that kind of thing? Do you plan it now, or do you let output and form influence it in some way?
No, I mean, not massively. The only thing that's really going to change it is if minutes change. But to be honest, I don't expect minutes to change massively with Haaland and Salah anyway. And it'd be Haaland in 9, Salah in 10, and then Haaland again in 11.
Yeah, it's
from 12 onwards. And obviously, trying to plan it too much 3-4 weeks in advance is probably a bit of a fool's game anyway. But I'm pretty sure it'll be Haaland, then Salah, then Haaland again. And then after that, to be honest, when I'm looking at it, it might be Son in 12. But it's so tricky to captain Son with his minutes being a little bit lower. Like we saw it against Luton as well. Like it doesn't feel as good as captaining, Salah in Haaland with their minutes being so high. So I think obviously you're looking at Spurs maybe in 13 because the Haaland and Salah captain play against each other. But yeah, I think for the next 3 weeks it's definitely going to be Haaland, Salah, Haaland.
Just to touch, just in 12, Arsenal are at home to Burnley, and this is where Saka, I think, is decent. See, this is why I think he can cover some of those captain days. I'd be happy to captain Saka versus Burnley, wouldn't you guys?
Yeah, Liverpool, I suppose they got Brentford, haven't they? Which isn't a bad fixture, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean...
But if you don't have Salah...
I was going to ask earlier, actually, because obviously if I don't get Saka in 10, 12 seems to be the time to get them in, doesn't it? Because then they've got those 4 nice fixtures. Because game week 11, they got Newcastle away. I'm not expecting an awful lot from that fixture, obviously. But yeah, 12 seems to be sensible because at least you've got him there for that captaincy option.
And Haaland's fine as well, right? It's easy to exaggerate. Haaland is good in any
the scope for getting it wrong with the captaincy just increases massively, doesn't it? Because obviously there's 3, and you mentioned Saka, maybe 4 in some weeks where you could feasibly put the armband, and it's just pure variance whether it comes in or not. So it is tough. I mean, those who do the best over this period will unfortunately be those probably who's luckiest with the captaincy, right? And it will be variance that perhaps wins out and is the most influential thing. But we're playing that game now. That's what we got, and we should be grateful for it, I guess, because at least it is a challenge, which certainly the captaincy hasn't been for a long time. I guess the only thing I would worry about Saka captaincy is the Arsenal team, although less so this year. Certainly last year, Odegaard, Martinelli, Saka, they've got sources of goals and assists all over the team, as of Liverpool, of course. But Salah just feels more dominant in that Liverpool team than Saka does in the Arsenal team. But arguably, Odegaard hasn't been as forward and as prominent in the points, and I don't think when you look in play, he's perhaps not getting, maybe it's without Xhaka, he's not getting forward as much, not getting those opportunities as much. So perhaps Saka is more dominant this year when Martinelli, Saka and Odegaard are in the side. Would you say that's the case, Lou? Would you think that
See, luckily I don't have to think about that because I just go on FPL review and it says a number next to Saka, which looks really good for his data on that week, and I can discard all of that because on any given week that could change. He's home to Arsenal are home to Burnley. They could thrash them 5-0 and no one would be surprised. Saka could get no returns, he could get 5. But guess what? That can happen to Salah. It has happened to Salah. It can happen to other players as well. It can happen to
Salah, but I don't think you can argue that Saka's as consistent as Salah. So you get a return with Salah, don't you? Whereas with Saka, you could get, it could easily be a Martinelli. Well, we saw it last week.
No, I mean, I would captain Salah because I've got him in my team because I think his number would even be higher on review. I don't doubt that it would be, but that's not the only reason. I think there's a lot of historical data behind it. He's a player who's regularly in the sort of 0.7, 0.8 XGI per 90. He's a better player for goal returns than Saka is. But this is more for the people who don't have Salah and, are questioning Haaland for whatever reason. Andy was touching on there. Son 70 minutes versus Wolves, if he is still 70 minutes by that point, or Saka home to Burnley with probably 90. I think I'd pick Saka in that situation if it was me, because I'd be scared to captain someone who might come off after 70 minutes. Spurs could easily be 2-3-0 up and then they just take him off or whatever. I mean, Wolves as well, when you play Wolves at home, they generally don't concede that many chances, I think, or that many goals that often. So it's a risky one.
I just don't, there's something about like Saka moving to that level where he is a regular captain. He's not quite there yet, but when it's Burnley at home, you have to consider it. And I think last year when I did go with him, he rewarded me really well. He was probably my most effective captain. I only did it 2 or 3 times, but he hauled. There's just that perception, I think, that Haaland's so dominant in the goals for City. Salah's seen as a dominant force for output in the Liverpool team. Is Saka as dominant in that Arsenal team? I would say not quite. That's my perception. Maybe it's not valid. Maybe there's no logic behind it. But I just think Arsenal can win a game 3-0. Saka comes out of it with a blank. That's possible. Whereas Liverpool win 3-0, Salah gets a return, Haaland gets a return for City in a 3-0. I just think it's more possible for Arsenal because they've got, or they did have last season. This season, I don't know. I've yet to see them look like they're going to win a game 3-0. They won at Bournemouth, but yeah. And he was in
any given week, Salah is more likely to get returns than Saka.
Yeah,
that's not in question.
But against Burnley, you just think the fixture overrides that.
Oh, I think it's okay to run it. Again, it's a question of value. Like if you're going to rip your team up to get Salah in just specifically because you're so worried about that week, I wouldn't do that. I would just captain Saka.
Yeah. It's not a week where if you've got Saka and you haven't got Salah, you worry about it.
No.
But equally, I don't think it's a week where you just get Saka in to captain him if you've got one of the other options as well, right? So it's just whether or not you want to roll the dice on Saka. I just think it's just good for us to have all these options over this period. And we're going to see, it'd be really interesting to see what the EO is like on Haaland over the weeks to come as people either get rid or decide to take the captaincy off him. Because as the ticker shows, and as we've discussed, we're looking at game week 10 and we're moving to Salah for the Forest game. We talked about game week 13 where Liverpool and City play each other. People are going to be on a different captain then, you would have thought, some. And then, you talk about 14 and possibly Saka comes into it as well. So the EO for the captaincy is going to be lower than it's been for any period, I think, last season over this spell. Because ownership of Haaland's gone down or people are actually betting against him more. But it all could change if he hauls against Brighton. You say no one picks on the back of form and points. It's only going to take a haul against Brighton and suddenly we'll see Haaland captaincy.
Well, no one credible. That's the way I'll get it, or that I'd have respect for. You're right, though. If Haaland scores a hat-trick versus Brighton, for most people, that conversation will be over what you've just had about who to captain all these weeks already.
Yeah.
It will already be over. But my point is that shouldn't matter. He should probably be the first choice captain in most of those weeks anyway by default, regardless of what he's done.
It does affect us, though, because the masses affect the EO, and the EO does, you say you don't make decisions based on it, but it's hard to avoid it, isn't it? I mean, if you've got to a point where you don't care about it and you make decisions regardless of that, there are credible managers who definitely do let it affect their decisions. Andy, do you actually consider it at all?
We've spoken about this before.
I know.
I don't think about it in terms of, because I obviously get blasted for being a template manager, and obviously I bring people in regardless of what their EO is. So even if a player is highly owned but they're scoring well and I don't own him, if I feel like they're on a good run and they've got nice fixtures, I'll still get them in. I don't really care. Like, if I think they're going to get lots of points in the next couple of weeks, I'll still do it. But I think he's almost broken it in terms of, when you've got a player that is 180, 190% EO, although he wasn't last week for the first time in quite a while.
Yeah,
I think he was only about
to see.
140, 150.
Yeah.
But when he's 180, 190% EO, it is very, very hard to ignore that. And I know,
I only look at it after. I wait for the deadline to go, then I have a look. I never look at it beforehand, just in case I do let it affect me.
But then, Luke said it, and Seb says it on Scoutcast. Like I said, he's gone without Haaland as well. They're not saying he's not going to score points.
No.
They're literally saying it's just a good opportunity to do it. And I think they're not doing it based on, we're not thinking about EO. And it seems like a good opportunity, isn't it? But yeah, I think it's hard to ignore that EO when it's there. When it's 180, 190%, I think that's really tough.
Yeah, and it's just interesting because there are managers who swear that the way to succeed in FPL is to play with EO in mind. Just doesn't feel right for me, and we've heard Luke doesn't either. And so I'm not pro using EO to influence decisions at all, because I think it's a bias, isn't it? So I agree. It's just when you're dealing with Haaland, it's terrifying, I must admit.
There are hidden layers there. I mean, effective ownership it's a representation as well of what the wisdom of the crowds are, isn't it? And generally it's a bad idea to ignore the wisdom of the crowds, because they're basing it on that people know what they're talking about generally when it comes to these sort of things. So there's that side of it. It's just when you're letting, I think effective ownership is useful if you want to look at two options and you want to decide how much risk you want to take. That's pretty much it. My season here could completely be thrown away over this 5-6 period. I get that. If Haaland goes crazy over this period and everyone's captains him, and by the way, my team does really bad compared, because that isn't just Haaland doing well, it's how well my team does compared, then it could throw it away. But am I particularly bothered? No, because if I think the points chance are as good or maybe even higher, I'm happy to back that self. And I think that gives you the best opportunity to have really, really good seasons. I might take a really bad one here, but I'm happy to chance that as a result. I'm not as fussed as some people are. I've got to claim a top 100k rank. Like,
here's a question for you.
It doesn't really matter to me.
You're making that decision ranked 260 in the world. Would you make that decision if you were where I was last year this time, which was about 4.5 million? Would you still do it? Would you let your rank influence your decision making? You wouldn't.
I don't think I would. No, I don't think I would. I don't think it matters to me. At the end of the day, where I am, the only way I'd take that into account is if it's towards the back end of the season and I'd start to be riskier earlier in the chance that I would climb up. Because at the end of the day, what does it matter if you come 4 million or 8 million? It doesn't matter, does it? But now, at this stage of the season, 8 weeks in, I didn't even know I was that rank until you told me. I wouldn't even really necessarily know. I haven't been paying attention to it. I don't care what anyone else is doing. Like, I appreciate my rank is actually pretty good amongst engaged managers. I think we're having a pretty bad time. But I'm not bothered about that. I look at the points tally each week and my team, and I think, oh, that looks a really good team on paper. And most weeks it's been coming back with a shocking return of like 40 points and Haaland covering it. So I'm disappointed. I don't care that it's doing well relative to other engaged managers. I'm just interested about me and how my team's doing, if that makes sense.
It does make sense, but I think there's a lot of managers out there who do look at their rank and think, I've either got to be more, they'll either go one way, they'll either be more conservative and go, well, I can't risk the game against the AO because I'll fall further back, or they'll go crazy and make maverick picks in an effort to catch up. I know, because I've been there, right? So I was kind of like caught between two stools last season, because I was coming on every week with like a 5 million, 4.5, 3.5. And I was, at Christmas, I was still struggling. I was thinking like 2.2 million or something like that. And it wasn't until after Christmas that the stuff started to come in for me. And I know I wrestled with that. What do I do here? Do I play more conservative, or do I try and stick to what I do and continue to take a few risks? And it is hard. I think what you've said tonight about EO and rank is not the norm. I think that managers are affected by both, more so than you. But then you've played the game a long time. But what do you think, Andy? Do you play differently depending on where you are in the rankings at all, or do you dismiss it totally?
It's hard because obviously overall rank that I sometimes there are obviously leagues where I care about where I finish way more than I care about overall rank. So like, I've got like
days,
home leagues where exactly. Like I've got home leagues where I've played against these people for like 20 odd years or whatever. And actually that does come into it a little bit for me then, where I'm like looking at their teams and going, oh, they don't have them. So I do think about it a little bit in that way. And I think it's just everybody's different, aren't they? Like, Luke's just said he doesn't think about it at all. There are times where I think about it in terms of leagues. There are people that will go, I'm 4 million overall rank, I'm just going to go for it now. And there's other people that, could have a really, really good start and think I'm going to be really conservative. Me personally, I don't think about it too much for my overall rank, but there are times, I don't think I massively make decisions differently based on the rank I am. It's still making decisions based on the fixtures and what their underlying data is like. I think that's you still making good decisions. And I think if you were a low rank, as long as you're making good decisions, I think you're going to be fine. That's the thing. Like there are people that maybe start changing how they make decisions where I think that's the wrong play personally. I think as long as you're still making good decisions, then it's fine.
I think Luke's absolutely right. I think I'm just saying that I think both EO and your own rank they shouldn't be things you let influence your decisions, but it's hard not to, is what I'm saying.
I think all three of us pick who we think is going to get the most points at the bottom line. We might have all those things in the background of our mind, here or there, hereabout, but when it comes to making that transfer on that week and you look at it, you go for the player that you think is
I like to think that's the case. We all
do that.
I like to think it is. But
you think you get influenced, but maybe like some people will to some extent, and that's fine. Maybe they even should be if they want to think about those consistent ranks. But I think, Mark, from my personal view, you're taking what everyone else is doing like as something that you should consider. I don't necessarily think it does, because I think you're probably better than most other people. So what you're thinking is probably more right.
Well, that's the only thing I was going to say, is that there are times where I don't think I'm actually I'm not very good at predicting what they're going to do, if that makes sense. So it's how much you want to back yourself to. Yeah, exactly. So like, for instance, there's a week where I'll be like, oh, I really back this player and I think he's going to do really well. But it's so easy to just go, but it's Haaland, and I'll just stick it on Haaland, and it's just good enough owning the other player. And it's like, there are weeks like that where I'm just like, am I thinking the right thing or am I not? And it's just so easy to go with Haaland sometimes.
Yeah, no, it's fair enough. Let's end on looking at our teams and see where we are. We'll start with Luke's team. Obviously, it looks great because you played the Wildcard last week and you've got plenty of choices. I mean, to have Bern and Zinchenko on the bench, I can only dream and cover such players. I mean, my bench is awful. Talk us through it then for the podcast as well. Just go through the team that you've got for game week 9.
Yeah, so I got Raya in goal, who I benched last week, and he got a clean sheet, surprisingly against Man City. I've got Trent Alexander-Arnold, Cash and Porro at the back. I've got Salah, Buster's captain at the moment, Bruno Fernandes, Diaby, Maddison and Son in midfield, and then I've got Darwin and Watkins up front. I've got, like you say, Zinchenko and Byrne on the bench alongside with Archer. I think I touched it on at the beginning. If Darwin's not starting, I'm just going to play Byrne home to Crystal Palace. You could argue I probably should be trying to fit him in my team anyway. I mean, to be honest, I might even look at maybe playing him over Diaby if Diaby's going to have another 60-minute one. You said about right at the beginning, what are your things you maybe would have changed? I'm still not 100% on Diaby. I just think at the end of the day, his minutes as well. I know there was the injury thing. His data's not all that good. It's very much a fixtures pick. If I could go back, maybe I would switch him to Alvarez, and then I could even, believe it or not, I could have afforded Cole Palmer if I'd have known what I know now. I'd have had him and had an even stronger team, because instead of Archer, that's probably what I would do different. But yeah, that's my team at the moment. Whether it will be Salah captain or not, probably will be, because I don't really have many other options. Right, we touched on Son. If someone could tell me Son's going to play 90 minutes, I might be more persuaded to do him, but I just don't see how we can bank on that. So I guess it's Salah for me.
It's close. I mean, Fulham have been pretty awful, and the Everton defence, you touched on it. It's not performed badly, and I guess that it's the derby as well. You just don't know what to expect from from a derby game.
This is the toughest week, as you said.
Yeah.
I think Haaland and Trippier this week have the potential to absolutely destroy. As good as that team looks, they could destroy me. But it's across
and the captaincy could go the other way, right? It could actually be Son that punishes you, not Haaland, because that fixture's good for Son. But again, it's the minutes. Yeah, I see why you're going Salah there, and it was close.
Do you know what I'm most impressed with? Do you know what I'm most impressed with, Luke?
Go on.
The colour coordination is beautiful.
Yeah, it's really well done.
I set that out on purpose.
I know you did. Down the middle.
Lovely.
And if you notice as well, everyone's got like 10 or 11 players at home this week as well. It's crazy how that's happened. If you bring Burn in, you've got one player away from home. And that's Bruno.
Burns. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I thought you were saying Burn. Yeah, Burns at home. That's Bruno, and he's arguably probably might be the worst pick I had on Wildcard. I've literally picked him for those two fixtures. He really needs to pay me back in this fixture because I touched on it. I picked him over Bowen because I preferred these two games.
Yeah,
and it's not worked out. But I can't, even though I'm going to take a price drop on him now, I can't not see this through for Sheffield United. This is the final hurrah for him. He's going regardless of what happens. But
you know what happens, don't you? You sell him for Bowen. Bruno's hits, gets 2 penalties a week after, and what can you do? But yeah, surely something in him for Sheffield United. They're so bad at the moment, Sheffield United. They're all over the shop.
I say that every week with Man United. I really hope it's the case. I mean, I'm just glad that I picked him over Rashford. Not because I think Rashford's a worse pick, but it's because of the minutes thing. Rashford keeps getting subbed off, and I think that has been performance related, to be honest. Could we be in a situation again where we get to 65, 70 minutes that Man United haven't scored? Who's coming off? It's not going to be Bruno, is it? It's going to be Rashford again. So
never coming off. No.
I hope that's not the situation. I hope Man United have actually got some goals for once. But
bloody hell, that early kickoff for you, captain and 3 players in it.
Yeah.
Oh my word, bloody hell.
I'll be switching off the phone and TV. Rest assured. For the rest of the weekend,
it could be spectacular. But like I say, because it's a Merseyside derby, you just don't know what you get in that, do you? An early goal, it's like last week with Spurs Luton. I said it, didn't I, Andy? I said an early goal and Spurs could go 3 or 4 and some could go gangbusters. They didn't get it and it didn't happen, and the sending off made it worse. It's the same for this. If Liverpool go early and get an early goal, then it has to open, whether Dyche will play more open. But I think he has this season. I think he has played more open. He seems to be more enterprising in his approach. That we've seen that with the data. Everton are surprisingly high in the attacking data. So it could be there for you, Luke. It could be a more...
I can already see Pickford's smug little face.
Oh, no.
That
would be beautiful. That would be beautiful if Pickford does put a man of the match display.
Yeah, gets a 10-pointer again. I can see Alan Goldsmith in the chat quickly saying, Luke, I get the squad, but I worry about the super strong bench. Yeah, I mean, that's part of the fact of having spare money that I don't know what to do with. And that's probably why Andy decided it wasn't much of a, he didn't want to do that. And then he couldn't see much of the upgrade in terms of not going with Haaland and where you're spending the money. So I've kind of been lavish with the money, to be honest. But there's also that rotation between Trent, Cash, Porro, Zinchenko and Burn is really, really nice for a long period. I can literally pick close to perfect fixtures for quite a while with that, I think. And that's part of the reason, because Arsenal's fixtures from 10 is it that are pretty good. Obviously, Arsenal and Spurs rotate home and away perfectly. So that's why. I mean, I've got the extra money, and it's why not? I'm not just going to have like 3 million sat in the bank.
No, some lovely options. I mean, I covered the team for sure. Your team, Andy, safer with the wild card. But talk us through it. Turner at home to Luton. That's a home banker straight away.
I was going to say, come on. Turner at home to Luton. Porro, Burn, and Cash at the back. Bowen, Maddison, Salah, Gordon, and Son in the middle with Watkins and Haaland up top. Mitchell, Taylor, and Archer on the bench with Areola. The only one is I'm not a massive fan of Bowen away from home at Villa. I think Villa are very, very strong at home, but obviously Bowen can do well in any fixture, really. Quite excited to play Gordon. It's obviously first time owning him, so that'll be quite exciting. But apart from that, I'm quite happy with the team. Turner at home to Luton, surely he gets another clean sheet for me. That's a banker, isn't it? Like you said.
I think so. We've been pretty good defensively. We'll play 4 at the back, but Murillo. Let's talk about Murillo. What a talent he looks. So I think we'll be all right. I think we'll win to 0. Turner has looked shaky though, but he didn't get dropped at Palace, so Vlachodimos will have to wait a bit longer, I think, which is good news for all of us. I think you'll be all right. I mean, looking at that, how many home players you've got? All of them. The entire 11, apart from Bowen.
No, it's just Bowen,
yeah. I mean, it's not often that happens without being manufactured in some way. It's like, it's it's surprising that it's turned out naturally that we've all got so many home players, which makes me worry about next week.
Have you guys looked at Game Week 12? I think it's similar, where all of our players are at home. And it's like the fixtures are mental on paper.
If we bring in Arsenal as well.
I think it's 12 anyway. Maybe Spurs are away actually in that week.
Well, yeah, if we bring in Arsenal and Brighton.
Yeah.
Because Brighton have Sheffield United at home and Arsenal have Burnley at home.
It's very strange how the fixtures swing and how so many teams have good runs in a cluster. It is a bit strange. I mean, again, it hopefully will mean that many teams diverge a bit, and for this period at least, even if Luke is right and we come back together for a template later on. But I do think this period could be a real turning point in our season. So, yeah, I think you're good here. I mean, Haaland captain makes sense. Gordon will be back in the side. Yeah, you haven't got to think about Son captain with Haaland there, so that solves that dilemma for us in a way. We haven't got to think about Son versus Salah, have we? So it makes sense, and I do think Newcastle clean sheets nailed on. How Cash will do against West Ham? I do think West Ham will score. I don't worry about Bowen at West Ham. I think he could nick one there. Villa have been strong at home, but they have been prone to error defensively. And, Brighton, they conceded one. Brighton just didn't play well in that game. I think there were more goals there for Brighton, but they didn't take their chances. So I think West Ham can get a goal. So I don't think Cash is automatically going to be a clean sheet. I think it's more about the attacking returns of Cash. He's been ridiculous.
Yeah, he's practically right wing, isn't he? So I'm absolutely fine with that. And obviously we've spoken about Newcastle defence against Palace as well. Burns the only one there I'm not expecting or hoping for an attack and return, whereas Porro and Cash,
don't know. He was on the end of a couple. He was unlucky not to get something at West Ham. He had two good chances. Areola made a good save for the second one. With Botman coming back though, you think maybe Burns only getting on the end because Botman's not there. I don't know, but. I don't know. You never know. But Palace are notoriously weak at set plays, less so this season. But, I mean, obviously, Newcastle are so effective with Trippier's delivery. I don't know. Burn could surprise you. Okay. My team, I've got Turner in goal as well. Burn, I'm playing. Cash, Trippier.
Love that comment from Dean.
Madison, Sterling. Yeah, Mitchell every week. Of course, he'd be on the bench. That's what, Sterling, Diaby, Salah, Son, Alvarez, Haaland, captain Haaland. So I'm toying with Sterling to Bowen this week so I don't get priced out because I really want him for the run. I have got 0.4 in the bank and Bowen's on 7.3 at the moment. And I don't want to... A, I don't want to be priced out. And B, I think I need at least 0.1 to do something with Baldock and Gusto because my bench is terrible. I've got a terrible bench because obviously I've got Trippier, Salah, Son and Haaland, right? So it's very difficult to get those players in and have any form of bench whatsoever. Gusto's got to go to a 4 million defender to give me somebody. And if I've got 0.1, I can do Baldock to another 4 million defender and then see how long that no bench can last. I don't know how long I can keep it up, but it's going well at the moment, so I've got to keep riding it out until I think otherwise. And obviously the wildcard's in my pocket, so I can keep that until around the 19-20 period when the double game week and the blank come in and decide what to do about it then. But that may all go to pot. A couple of injuries and I'm shafted. So we'll see. I've been lucky though at the moment. I've avoided the injuries, took a Stupidan out before his injury, Saka out before his injury. It has gone my way. So as long as that continues, I'll carry on. But it's meant I've had to really drive on the prices because I've always been like one price rise away from being priced out on the player I want, and it's pretty it's an anxious way of playing, but it's worked so far. So I'm going to just keep going and see how long I can keep it up.
So can you not roll Mark this week because of the Bowen will price change? You think, and then you won't be able to get him? Sorry,
I've already made one transfer. I've already got Pickford out for Areola.
Oh, okay.
Because unless I did that again, I wouldn't. Unless I did that.
Come from nowhere. I thought you were talking about doing Sterling to Bowen a minute ago. Have you got 2 free transfers?
No. I'm even considering doing it for the hit to lock in the money because that's I did.
To me.
I know it is crazy, and I may not do it because obviously Sterling owned Arsenal's.
He's confident, Luke.
But
look at him.
I'm not going to question it, but you're bringing in a player to play against Cash for a -4. That doesn't feel instinctively right.
I know,
but
and that's why
I understand it on the pricing. That's why I asked. Like, if you're going to be locked out of Bowen as a result, then. Maybe,
basically, I had to go Pickford or Areola to avoid. If I didn't do it when I did it, I couldn't even consider Bowen. So now I've given myself the option to get Bowen, but I've got to be quick with it because a drop for Sterling. Well, Sterling's not going to drop, luckily, because he's actually increasing in ownership after the haul, thanks to the masses. But I think the Bowen one has got me on edge. I'm 0-1 away from being priced out, so I've got to be careful. So I'm probably going to leave it because the hit's doesn't feel worth it, especially when you're picking an attacker against your defender. So I'll just bank on Sterling doing something against a non-promoted team for once, and then do it next week. I don't think Bowen's likely to go.
Well, Arsenal's a tough team to do anything against, isn't it? But I think it's fine. I think he's an easy weight to 10 for West Ham. There's no need to hit Bowen.
Yeah, it's only if I feel I'm going to be totally priced out, because Gusto's not going to drop because he's locked. So I can sell him for 4-1 next week and get that 0-1 back, which means I've got an option then to increase Bulldog. But it's literally week to week, I've been playing with 0-1 all the time. It's like, but actually I think it's been an advantage because it's meant that I've had to make quick decisions. And I think that's all come from having Salah from the start and putting myself budget restricted right from the start. And it's played in my favour because luck has gone my way by doing that. But how long it can continue, I don't know. So we'll see. The wildcard might have to come out in game week 10, but hopefully not.
I completely agree with you, though. I think I'm 100% with you that you've been lucky this year.
Did you notice that? It was all outcome based. The outcome's been great. I've been really lucky. So what I need to do is just keep getting lucky. Okay, if it's that easy, Mark,
it's not.
Sign me up.
It's like, why change tact? Why change tact when it's going well? It's like it
sounds like outcome based thinking to me, Mark.
Maybe, but I'm rolling with it. I'm rolling with the momentum, which doesn't really exist. I know it's just an imaginary thing, but it's like I'm not going to change the plan at the moment. I've basically gone into each game week with a plan, stuck with it no matter what the output is, and it's been okay.
You almost need that slap in the face where Sterling
and it's going to happen.
Start. The Abbey's still injured. Son's rested after the international, and you go, "Hang on, I've got 6 players. I probably have to fix this."
I every week I think it's coming as well. I'm thinking I can't get away.
Well, last week
I had nine starters in 1 week, but I've always got away with it because someone who's quite a differential does well and just gets me over the line. So I've deserved a slap in the face a few times and got away with it. But I don't know how much further I can go with it. To be honest, we'll see. But yeah. It's been fun.
You keep doing it, mate. I am more than happy to give you that slap in the face. It is
Thank you very
absolutely
much.
fine, Mark. Next fest, I'll be there for you.
Yeah, you gave me a lick in the face. Now it's going to be a slap in the face. That's
exactly.
That's bloody typical. Right. Thanks so much, folks. We've gone on a bit, but that was inevitable with 3 of us because the more you inject in, the more time you take up. We didn't get to any questions, but there was a lot of comments, and there's how many people watching? 890. Thank you very much for joining us at 11:15 on a Friday night in an international break. It just shows you, doesn't it? The Friday night slot has proved very, very popular, and even on the international break, when there's still a week and a half to go, people want FPL, which is crazy. Just shows the level of obsession out there. I can't wait for this weekend to be over and get back to it as well. The international breaks are utterly painful, and England do nothing to compensate, do they, really, to be honest? So how are you spending your weekend, Andy?
Me, I've got the kids all weekend, so my missus is off to watch Strictly.
Is she?
Yeah,
wow.
Literally watching it.
Who's her favourite? Who's her favourite in that?
God, I don't know, all the guys. I think it's Strictly Curse. I might be single by the end of the weekend, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Oh wow, Luke, what are you up to?
Well, similar. I've basically been watching my missus watch the David Beckham documentary.
Oh,
and she's had similar feelings.
That has been happening in my house as well. She likes to. She says to me, "Oh, it's a very interesting documentary." That's not why you're watching it.
Yeah, that's funny. You've never watched football before.
I know.
What's going on here?
To be fair, it's the only reason I'm watching it as well.
I was watching it going, actually, the content is actually quite interesting for a football fan. But I was thinking, this is a bit. There's too much football content in this for you to be watching this. I don't really understand.
You can't blame them, like Andy said. You can't blame them.
Fair enough. I suppose not. Look at us.
Oh, cheers.
Yeah, bloody hell.
Yeah. Oh, dear. Right, with that note, it's a good night for me.
Good night.
Oh, good night from me, yeah.